Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Dad.
So, those of you who don't know, I'm Professor Chuck. This is the Professor Chuck YouTube channel. I've got Chris here with me today, and today we're going to tackle a very interesting topic, very relevant, time-based. We're going to talk about the gig economy, and specifically kind of what its impact might be on employee loyalty, right? Because obviously some things have shifted over time. Let's start off with the gig economy. What's your understanding of the gig economy? What is that today?
So there's three main components to the gig economy. There's the people on the other side of it who have, and I'll further explain this as I get into part 3, but who have something of value, something to utilize. In the middle, there's an app usually, and then on the other side of it is is someone utilizing all of it. So for instance, Uber or AirBNB.
Yep.
The other side of it, they have, let's say, a house or a car. The app's in the middle, facilitating between the customer,
yep,
and the automobile or the house that is currently being owned by someone else.
So the gig is taking on a gig, right? And you got the Uber drivers who they're in California. We have to talk about this for a bit. Is right now they're not considered employees, but it's shifting into that, right? It's
yes.
a gig. You're a 1099 independent contractor, right? And you're doing small jobs, incremental jobs. You can take them or leave them, right? That kind of thing, as opposed to the traditional job, 9 to 5, clocking, punch in, and doing the job. Does that kind of sum it up?
Exactly.
All right, so we've got Uber, we've got Lyft, right? The car ones. Who else comes to mind for you in gig economy?
Uber, Lyft, I mean, you've got a ton
You said Airbnb.
Airbnb.
I know for myself personally, this might become a shock to some people. I'm actually involved in the gig economy too. I do secret shopping, right? So, my focus on quality, focus on looking at, quality improvement. There's a couple different ones that I use. We'll have those links down below so people can take a look at those too, get involved in. But sometimes it's a $5 job here, a $15 job there. Had some as high as $68, which is great. Those are individual assignments that I can take or not take. When I take them, I do them, I get paid, right? I don't want to do it for a while, I lay off, I don't do it. So I have complete control in those situations. So as an employee, as an independent contractor, it's kind of cool to be able to do that. Have you done any of the gig economy yourself?
I've utilized the services, so I've used Airbnb, I've used Uber, and I've used Lyft before as well.
Okay.
And those, the services are spot on, they work, and I think it's because of the interface that they have.
Let's talk about that for a minute. The services that you received through the gig economy. Let's take Uber, for instance. What stands out to you like is a really amazing experience you had in Uber? And we've never talked about this before, so have you actually had one?
Yeah, so, I mean, when I went to Atlanta a few months, or almost a year ago at this point, yeah. I had to get picked up from the airport, and I didn't want to take a taxi. I'd rather, like I said, the interface is super well designed where I can say, hey, I'm here, and I want to go here. And it'll tell me the price points. It'll tell me, how many people are going to be riding with me.
I've heard this before. Do you get a rating on the drivers too?
Yes. The drivers rate you and you rate the drivers. So
passengers have ratings, drivers have ratings. So if you look at Uber as being in the middle, they are the facilitator of this interaction, right? That's all they are. Somebody else is providing the service. Somebody else needs the service. They're just the kind of in-between, go-between facilitator. Is that right?
Exactly.
It's funny because next week on Monday, I'm going to be in Minneapolis, and it will be the first time ever I have utilized Uber. So I haven't even downloaded the app yet, so I've got to go through and do that. So we've got people who are able to pick up side jobs, side gigs. I say side, some people make a living out of this as well, right? That they're actually, this is their primary source of income, is these gigs that they're doing. Do you know anybody who fits into that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Atlanta, I used Uber the whole time I was there, right? And I started talking with a bunch of these guys, right? So I got to hear some of their life stories of how they even got into Uber in the first place. And a lot of it, or one of the guys in particular, he said, he had gone through some struggles, he had lost his job, and this was his only source of income. And he was loving it because, one, he could, like you said, dictate his own hours.
Yep.
Two, he can earn as much as he could drive in a day.
Yep.
And he was in downtown, so I mean, there was a lot of demand for services like his.
Okay.
And he said this was his comeback trail. You know, he went from rock bottom with no job, realized I had a car, signed up for Uber, and he started making his living again.
Okay. Very interesting. I know I'm reflecting on my own personal journey. I spent 20 years in corporations, right? In corporate world, right? Working for different companies. And my God, it's been about 7 years now. I've been on the entrepreneurial path. And one of the things that I've really recognized, you hear this all the time, right? When you're going to business school, when people are giving you advice, is diversify your income stream, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get lots of different ways of making some money. And in the corporate world, I thought, oh my God, I'm putting 50, 60 hours a weekend, at these jobs. There's no way I'm diversifying and it's paying all my bills, so I'm good. I never really looked into it. But when I crossed over into being an entrepreneur, right, we're owning our own businesses, doing some part-time things, like part-time teaching, right, doing this for my fans, thank you fans, doing all this stuff, it's how do I diversify and looking at different ways of bringing income in. And this gig economy, this fits perfectly into that whole model. Do you agree?
I do, and I have another point on that one too, is because as humans, our interests are never just one thing. For instance, you go to your corporate job, your interests have to be for that one thing. Right now, and I'm seeing this from you, is you have these interests everywhere now. You want to help them in this area. You want to do things like this. And this is an ability or an enabler for you to diversify your interests as well.
Yeah, it keeps me busy, right? There's a quote that I don't even know who said it. I say it. It's that if I'm gonna get bored, or if I get bored, I'm gonna get into trouble. And so keeping me interested and engaged and intrigued, it's one of those things that keeps me going. I will give you another example. In my corporate career, I never spent more than 4 years at any one job.
What do you mean?
4 years. So start to finish at a corporation, I would start and I would last for 4 years. And it wasn't by plan or design, but 4 years was that cutoff where I was gone. And I think a big part of it was, it's the opportunities elsewhere, it's thinking about what's next, but that element of boredom was in there too. And I won't say that my jobs were boring, they became somewhat routine for me. And when that happened, I had to make a change. And so, again, not by conscious design, when opportunities came my way, I took them. In this entrepreneurial world now, I mentioned earlier, it's been about 7 years. There's not a day that goes by that it's not just full of interest and intrigue and what's next and how are we going to make this work. And that total responsibility for it is amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
So what are your thoughts then on, like, especially from your experiences and understanding how other people operate, does this help retain employees by them enabling them to have other side jobs? Like, for instance, your own business. If your employees had other side gigs going on, do you think they would stay in the business longer and work harder? Or do you think that it would say, oh, you know what, I'm gonna leave you as soon as I come in?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's very dependent on the employee or the person themselves, kind of what their priorities are. But this is interesting. I hadn't even thought about this. The business your mom and I own. For those of you who don't know, Quality First Medical Billing. It's a company we own. We've owned it for good 18 years now, 19 years. Oh my gosh, 20 years.
20 years.
Do the math. We have employees. We have folks who are working with us there, and they're amazing people. And when I was going through the transition of understanding that shift from corporate world to being an entrepreneur, that fire that got lit under me, I thought maybe there's other folks who are going to like this as well. So how can I make these two things fit together? And in medical billing, our clients are doctors, medical providers, nurse practitioners, right? Clinics. So we help those folks with their billing. And one of our goals, like any company, is to grow. So, instead of hiring a sales force and going and looking at a bunch of different people and trying to investing that way, one of the avenues we looked at was taking our existing employees and creating an incentive program for them. So if they were to actually make a recommendation and that recommendation became a client, that we would pay them commission as though they were a salesperson in addition to their salary.
So regular employee and trying to see who's got that entrepreneurial spirit.
So I'm gonna throw a word at you. I learned this as I started teaching, because I hadn't heard this term before I started teaching business. It came up in a textbook, and I love this word. Instead of entrepreneur, the word that I like in this case is intrapreneur.
Okay.
So intra, I-N-T-R-A, and entrepreneurship is the same spirit of entrepreneurship. I want to grow a business, I want to make it better, but applying it within the confines of a company. So you think about salespeople, right? You think about salespeople, they're out there, they're entrepreneurial, right? They're out there trying to grow. They're on the phone, they're talking to people, they're making things happen for companies within the structure of a corporation. So separate from being an entrepreneur where you risk your money, you risk your time, you risk everything, there are folks who don't want to risk all of that, yet still want to put that entrepreneurial spirit to work. That's the intrapreneurship.
So would you classify Uber, Lyft drivers, Airbnb as this entrepreneurial because they're working within the framework that Uber, Lyft, all of them have designed already, and they're trying to create business within that framework?
I don't know. That's a great question. There's this element where I think there are some people within that structure who treat it like a job. They come every day. It's like, oh, I got a gig. I take a gig. That's it, right? There are other folks, I think, who try to build a clientele, build a relationship with the people so that that's the first person that they're going to come back to and get that business again. I think those people have an intrapreneurial or entrepreneurial spark.
Right.
Regardless of which structure it's in, it's that flavor. But the Uber driver themselves, I think that model, you can be, I'm just an employee, I'm just doing a job, or I'm building a business. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the intent almost of how you're approaching the whole model and what you're going to do with it that's going to make that difference.
I've noticed that too, especially with, for instance, Airbnb. I've noticed that especially more because some people try to go above and beyond, whilst other Airbnb hosts just meet the minimum standards, right?
It's just a room.
Yeah, it's just a room. Here you go, sleep in it. You've got running water, right? Whereas the other ones, there's fresh towels every day. Their fridge is full of water, soda, even one time.
So go back to that Uber. There's people who have the snacks and
the
stuff
snacks
in the car.
And the chargers.
And there's some that do that just minimum of having that, some who really elevate it, some who promote it, right? Different.
Right.
Okay.
And then that creates their clientele list because it's that enticing factor. Hey, I want to go back to you because you're my guy. You did the extra steps for me.
So designing the system so people come back to it as well, that goes back to the company, in this case Uber, Airbnb, to promote the possibility of somebody being a return customer to you. And I think you mentioned it with Uber, that rating system component, that has an element of putting ownership on the individual. As they do better, they get more. Does that make sense? Same with Airbnb. There's a rating system there too, right? There's people who can put comments in and that kind of thing. There's people who, if you're going to go to a particular location, maybe you come back to it, right? Based on the experience that you had. Yeah?
Exactly.
Okay, so now we've got the gig economy. We've got people who are hustling, right? They've got their side hustles here. They're doing stuff everywhere. That impact on loyalty to a corporation. This is a huge shift, generationally speaking, over the last few generations. We'll go back to your grandfather, right? And then grandparents, that kind of thing. My parents, that generation, the boomers.
Okay, boomer.
Okay, boomer. The boomers, there was a lot of loyalty to corporations. We started seeing a little bit of shift here in their generation. Yes. Prior to that, it was kind of an absolute. You're working for a company, you just work for them, right? You're not shifting and going to different places. Boomers started playing with that a little bit. 10, 15 years maybe, right? Making a shift here and there. It's possible to happen.
Right.
My generation, I mentioned my own personal journey, 4 years, right? That's a thing that, that I had. Maybe it's a little too often, but it was what was happening. Now your generation, folks leaving companies, how long do you think the average tenure is?
The average one, based on my research, is less than 10 years now of people shifting through new jobs. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know the exact number. But especially, I mean, you look back to the industrial age where there's one factory in town or one thing in town. Most of the people in town work there, right? And then you had, like you said, like there's this shift, this generational shift where it's, you know what, now there's multiple corporations, you can go here and here.
Yep.
Your generation really started experimenting with that.
There was a few things that happened, and I'll talk about the context, and then I'll talk about the legality piece of it. The context piece of it, you have this shifting with the laws. Pensions was a huge
Yes.
deal, right? So on the before, pensions were very, very common. Where a company, you're contributing to it, the company contributes to it, there's a pot of money, you retire, you're getting paid out of that. Pensions go away, right? Pensions start to cripple companies because people are living longer, right? You're getting more people through them, people are mismanaging the funds potentially. There's all these issues with managing pensions to where it's such a big burden on a company that some of them go under. Some of them restructure. A recent one that really has been affected by that, GE, General Electric, they were definitely affected by this, a huge shift for them. So you've got this shift, and 401ks became
the new norm.
The new norm, exactly. Once they became legal to be able to do that, right? They became the norm, where companies contribute to it, but they have no management of that money afterwards, right? That's a separate entity that's managing that. And we have yet to feel that full impact,
Right.
of people who are living off of just those 401ks as their retirement. We're in that transition phase right now. But back to employee loyalty, the portability of my retirement now, right? I'm putting it into a separate entity. I'm putting money in, and when I leave that company, I can take that 401k with me. I don't have that long-term.
Whereas before, you had that pension and you can only utilize it from that one company.
So I have to retire from that company in order to take that money with me.
Which means your loyalty is, it's solid.
It's loyalty, it's purchase loyalty.
Purchase loyalty.
There's a pain that you feel by
Right.
leaving, and a huge pain if you're talking about your retirement. So that shift, I don't know that it caused it, but it absolutely is a contributing factor, right? To not feel that pain piece of leaving. It's like, oh, okay, well, I can go somewhere else. Lots of options that are out there. The visibility of jobs is a lot different today than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago.
What do you mean?
Internet, right? You're talking about posting a job. Well, if you have a job to post for, people can see it. Right? Whereas before the internet was there, you had your local newspapers that you were posting jobs in, you had recruiters that you were doing, headhunters, right? These were the norm, actually the only way to go get talent. Whereas today, I know, again, back to our medical billing company, I can post a job and put it out there, and within half hour, 30 minutes, a day, I've got 50 applicants, right, for a position. And it's people who passively looking, they're not actively looking. They can just go on the website, they see it, they set up reminders. So the whole thing is you can put out the feelers really quick, and the pain to move from a company to a company isn't as strong. So we have a lot more movement.
And so employee loyalty really drives into a couple different factors, is the portability of their 401ks and the rise of the internet and mass information being able to spread quickly.
Yep. So you got that combination there, and then what we called employee loyalty, right? I guess we can measure it. We'll just give it quantity instead of loyalty, because loyalty is a feeling, right? The behavior is retention, right? Is the movement of people going from a company to another. Whereas I felt myself, I've been loyal to people over the years, right? Because I like them, I enjoy working with them. But my loyalty, my behavior has been that I've left some of those companies over time. Yeah.
So for people, or just in general, Like, if someone moved, you'd move with them?
Oh, no. I always evaluated it in the standpoint of what it meant for me individually, right, for the future, and then what I could contribute to that team, right, and then what it meant to my future. So in the corporate world, I always saw this element of advancement. That was like a key driver for me, achievement, if you will. Right? If you go back to those behavioral type things that drive human behavior, right?
Self-actualization.
Well, Maslow fits into that for sure. I'm going to go to on the other side. I think it's McClelland, right? Need for achievement.
Yes.
What is it? Power, affiliation, and achievement. Achievement is a driving factor for me, right? I know that. I've done some self-assessment. But going through those steps, achieving the next step, that's really driven me. So, corporate world, achieving is managing more people, having a higher title, having a higher pay, having more benefits, having it was quantifiable. And if a company, I got to the point where I thought I had maximized that, or it was going to take a lot longer to get to the next level, I would look outside at what would afford me that next level. Now, I'm not giving advice here. This is not something I think that works for everyone. In fact, I think there were some pretty bad things that happened to me along the way by choosing that path.
Right.
But fast forward to today in the gig economy, you have a lot more opportunity, I think, for that same type of shifting and adjusting. So one last question. I want to kind of wrap this up a little bit. So the gig economy, the downside of it. People who are looking at those gigs as their full-time employment.
Yes.
Right? Where, I identify as a YouTuber, right? A YouTube star. I'm not making any money at it, but, I'm making film, I'm YouTubing, right? I'm an Uber driver. If that showed up on your resume, that's what you are. I'm an Uber driver. Is that a bad thing? Is that going to affect them when they want to go to a job with benefits in a corporation, if they want to, if they go down that path? Or is this the springboard for them to spark their entrepreneurial spirit and truly be entrepreneurs where they're defining their own destiny?
There is a sense of good and bad, especially in that framework there, just because of the fact that, one, it's the multiple options that they have because there are multiple platforms now. For you to have small gigs here and there. Yep. Because solely relying on one platform is going to be the demise of you.
So you even think solely relying on a corporation,
right,
is a potential negative?
I mean, look at Sears and Toys R Us. I mean, if you 100% relied on them, they are a big company. Well, same thing even down to the nitty-gritty of the entrepreneurial spirit is if you rely solely on one platform, you have a lot more risk. Now, you can do a bunch of small gigs, or you can find a way to diversify even that one gig. Like YouTube having sponsors on it instead of just having one, relying on the YouTube income, right? Yep. That diversifies that one thing. Uber, I mean, you have Uber Eats now, you have Uber.
That's true.
You have your regular Uber drivers?
The craziest one I heard on Uber? My students, they did some research on this, and it was the cats. Have you heard this one?
No.
So there's an Uber service. I don't know if it's still around, but there was a model that they tried where you're at home and you don't have any pets, right? You're like, I want to order a cat temporarily. Like an Uber driver would drive to your house with a cat, deliver the cat for an hour, or whatever, and you pet the cat, and you're done, you give the cat back, and the Uber driver goes away, but you pay for that service of Wow, right? I'm sure that's not going to appeal to everyone.
No, of
but
course.
If it appeals to...
There's always going to be weird niche markets.
In a dense population, you find a niche market, and there you go. So, anyhow, I'm sorry, I'm trying there. That one fascinates me. But again, you're right. There's that diversification as a potential upside.
And of course there is a downside too, because there isn't some sense of security as well. I mean, with a corporate office, there can be more of a sense, not full-on security, but more of that sense of security. Whereas Uber drivers, let's say no one needs a ride that day, or you live in a very rural area,
Yeah.
then it's going to be harder to rely on that as a day in, day out kind of situation. It might not work for everyone is what I'm saying. There's definitely people it works for,
Yeah.
and there's definitely people it doesn't work for.
Yeah, that sense of security, that's a good point. There are people who are going to thrive in that chaos of who knows. There are people who are going to get crushed by it. There's people who need the sense of security, but that sense of security might be a false sense of security, but it might be what they need in order to operate and function on a daily basis, right? There's a psychological piece to that. Because if I was to walk through, there is no security for anybody in any company ever.
No.
None. I mean, government work, military work, you're in the private sector, you're in the public sector. It doesn't matter where you're at and what you're doing. There is risk involved with it. But some people don't see that, right? They can turn a blind eye to it. But if I was to pick apart that risk, some folks would be able to freak out, right? To understand that risk is really there for them. So you've got that piece of it. And then on the company side, you've got this problem of retention. Right, you gotta do something different. You've got to appeal to these people and bring them in, because in a competitive market, when there's lots of choices, customer-wise, they can go different places. You have to, instead of being a commodity as an employer, you have to step up your game and be able to give these folks something they can't get anywhere else. Individualize the tension. Give them a sense of purpose. You have to find out what's important to them.
Right.
And be able to give it to them individually. Some companies, I think, fail at this, where they see a good company like Google, right? They're doing some amazing stuff like, hey, we got this cafeteria set up, we're feeding all our people, blah, blah, blah. And they take one piece of it and pick it up and put it in their company and expect results. Hey, we're feeding you now. Well, feeding is important, but it's not necessarily the whole picture. Does that make sense?
You listened to a part of what they wanted, but it wasn't the thing that, was the one factor that would retain them.
Yeah, so if I looked at Google in its heyday in terms of recruiting and trying to get employees in, they have all the stuff, right? They had the cafeteria, they have the daycare, they have the laundry services, they have volleyball courts, they have flexible schedules, they have all this stuff, right? At the core of it is, hey, we're in a competitive market. We need to retain people, find out what's important to them, and keep them, right? Really kind of make this a different place. That's the core of it. But if I take the cafeteria piece out and I say, that's the core piece, right? Hey, we're feeding you.
It's out of context.
My core isn't, I care about you. It's, hey, I'm trying to manipulate you. Hey, I'm trying to do something.
And we as people we can see through that.
We can see the intent, right? And I think intent is really important here. From a corporation standpoint, from the employee standpoint, and it's really hard because this requires good communication, digging underneath the layers to be able to figure out what's important to a person and being able to provide it and then be willing to help them with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this entrepreneurial thing, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. People have this desire to be entrepreneurs. Many of them don't know how to be, right? And so they take that spirit and sometimes get funneled into it becomes a job. That's not entrepreneurial. It's how do you grow it, right? And I think that's the lesson for today. All right, cool. So explored the gig economy, explored loyalty just a bit. We of course hit on communication, right? The importance there.
Technology,
the impacts and legal shifting changes in terms of economics, providing that impact on this whole thing. Truly enjoyed the conversation today. So folks, hopefully you join us again next time. This is our new format for a bit, season 2, right? Our second phase of this.
Yes.
And please like, subscribe, and follow us here, right? And it would help us so much if you folks would give us feedback on what you'd like us to talk about.
In the comments.
Yeah, in the comments below, let us know what subjects you want us to tackle. It's a lot of fun, this intergenerational type dialogue between it. But we want to hear from you too. So join us next time, and thank you very much. Have a good one.